This is Roman's story. It's a story from the chapter entitled Caring and Connection. There are different levels to being a doctor. On the surface lies the technical level, filled with specific activities, taking the patient's medical history, performing the physical examination, ordering the necessary tests, pinning down a diagnosis, and deciding on a course of treatment. Deeper down lies the more subjective level of doctoring, the level where you feel concern for your patients and you care about what happens to them, the level where your own humanity is wanting them to get better and where you are praying that they will. The sickest patients, the ones who need your fiercest caring, summon you powerfully to this deeper level. This explains, I think, why I loved caring for these patients the best. I loved the way they called me to this deepest level of doctoring. Roman was one of these. A slender 3-year-old boy, he came under my care while I was supervising the pediatric inpatient service. He had been admitted from the walk-in clinic because of dehydration, and for 3 days he had been sitting in his crib on the ward in a state of silent vigilance. He had not uttered a sound and had refused to eat or drink. Despite repeated examinations, a battery of diagnostic tests, and consultations with various specialists, we still had no idea what was wrong with him. The child's face was drawn and pensive. He made no protest, either about being alone and away from his mother, or about being examined by strangers, nor even about having his blood drawn repeatedly and an IV kept inserted in his arm. It was as if he was conserving energy for an unseen fight that only he knew he was waging. With his large brown eyes, he watched the hospital staff intently, following our every move. He seemed to be expecting something to happen. But what? Unhappy about our lack of progress on his case, I decided to peek in on Roman one more time before leaving the hospital that particular day. Perhaps he would give some indication of improving, and I wouldn't need to continue worrying that we were missing something serious. Or perhaps this time there would be some hint as to what dark distress lurked in his little body, and we could marshal our medical expertise to fight the intruder for him and overcome it before it progressed any further and took some terrible toll. But as I paused quietly for a moment at the doorway to Roman's room, I saw he looked no different. I felt my brow wrinkling into a disquieted frown. In his state of hypervigilance, Roman immediately noticed my presence, and as his dark eyes turned to look toward me, an odd thing happened. I felt a charge of energy fly across the room and pierce my mind with a stab of urgency. I understood the meaning of Roman's look as clearly as if he were speaking. It said, "Help me." I went to Roman's crib, picked him up, and held him in my arms. Then I examined him one more time, hoping for some further insight, but none came. After laying him gently down and noticing with concern how little protest he made at being so quickly abandoned, I returned to the nurse's station, more disturbed than ever. Checking the order book, I saw that the CAT scan I had requested earlier was scheduled for ASAP, and I gave instructions to the staff to page me the moment it was done. I left the hospital mentally pleading, "Please, life, help us out here. We need some answers, and we need them soon. Show us what we have to do before it's too late." As evening approached, I couldn't get that look from Roman out of my mind. Sitting beside my husband Charles in a sold-out concert at Carnegie Hall, I could barely keep still. Paul Simon, one of my all-time favorite musicians, was making a rare appearance in Manhattan, and I'd been looking forward to this performance for weeks. Nevertheless, I kept checking my watch as the time crept by. Finally, my restlessness drove me out to the lobby, where I phoned the hospital. When I got through to the resident on call, I asked if the results of the CAT scan were available. Learning that the test had not yet been done, and hearing useless excuses about why, I exploded. I heard myself shouting, "Don't tell me what the problems are. Get it done now and page me with the results." My vehemence shocked me. I was usually patient and understanding with the overworked young docs in my department, having once been one myself. I returned to listen to Paul Simon's melodic voice, feeling tense and distracted. An hour or so later, the resident paged me with an update. The CAT scan had uncovered something bizarre and alarming. A large abscess was gnawing its way down through little Roman's chest, between his esophagus and his trachea. The residents had notified the surgery team immediately. They were taking Roman to the emergency room, to the operating room for emergency surgery at that very moment. Several hours later, the surgeons reported their findings. The abscess had been eating through the wall of Roman's trachea. They couldn't explain how or why such a life-threatening infection had taken hold there, but without a doubt, it would soon have broken through to his airways, filling them with so much pus that he would have quickly suffocated to death. The diagnosis had been made just in time. Later that evening, after the clanging sound of danger had begun to fade from my mind, I reflected on how precariously Roman had been balancing at the edge of life and death. I had felt it in the core of my being. Released now from the sense of urgency, I relaxed for the first time in days. I hadn't realized how urgently I had been calling out to life for help. After surgery, Roman recovered quickly and uneventfully. On the day he was due to be discharged, I went to his room to discuss the medical follow-up plans with his mother. By now, Roman was a different child, perky and playful and eating like a champ. I gave him a final examination and a little hug, gratified by his indignant squirming. Then his mother and I spoke about our mutual sense of relief that everything had turned out well. As I moved toward the door of his room to depart, something made me glance back over my shoulder. There was Roman, looking intently at me from his mother's arms. Once again, his large brown eyes met mine, and I had the sense of being seen by someone with whom I shared a deep knowing, the knowing of just how close the shadow of death had come. A moment later, the connection vanished as quickly as it had appeared. Roman turned back to his mother, who was squeezing him playfully, and I headed down the hall to tend to other patients, sending gratitude to life as I went.